mix a bunch of herbs and leaves and drink some smoothie is one of the worst things you can do to your liver. Speak to any liver specialist and they will tell you after alcohol, one of the most common reasons for liver damage is people drinking stupid things.
I saw some content about adding ghee to your coffee.
A gram of ghee is 9 calories. It's a highly calorie dense food. It is a high risk. No qualified doctor will ask you to eat large amounts of ghee.
There is a glucose monitor meter and all the time I see, after having 2 toast or poha, my sugar went up and then it was down.
It is again one of those typical social media trends. If you are not a diabetic person, you learn absolutely nothing from wearing a glucose monitor. The fact that you eat some carbohydrates, that it will produce a sugar spike is perfectly normal biological behavior for every living thing on the planet. We believe milk fat turned into ghee is a superfood, but milk protein turned into whey is bad for us. It is ridiculous. We are now become lazy to the point where we somehow believe that a very confident sounding person saying something in 60 seconds is giving you gyaan. He is not. It's very important for everyone to realize 90 seconds mein gyaan nahi milta hai.
So true.
Coconut oil, ghee, palm oil are all very similar saturated fats. But palm oil is considered villain and coconut oil and ghee are praised. If you go to Malaysia, Indonesia, they will consider palm oil to be the healthiest. Both of us can't be right. The actual answer is that...
Hello friends, I am Preeti Thakkar and in the series of WSC Baatein, I welcome you all. आज हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं बहुत ही बड़े सेलिब्रिटी बोल सकती हूँ या फूड साइंटिस्ट बोल सकती हूँ. He is a technology person, a musician and a very grounded and down to earth human being. I just love to hear all his podcasts और मुझे यकीन है कि आप लोग भी बहुत ही ज़्यादा इनको सुनते हैं, कहीं ना कहीं काफ़ी चीज़ों से रिलेट भी कर पाते हैं. तो ऐसी ही बढ़िया शख्सियत आज मेरे साथ जुड़ी है and it is none other than Krish Ashok. I welcome you, Ashok. How are you?
Pleasure being on your podcast.
It is wonderful to have you. It was a dream come true for WSC to have you on the forum. I think a lot of our women are always concerned about food, always concerned about what they are feeding to their kids, family, and today they are going to get a lot of solutions to it. To begin with the question 1,
yes,
we are talking about food, and what according to you is food?
See, food, actually, there's a more romantic definition and then there's a very hard and cold scientific definition, right? So I'll give you the hard and cold scientific definition first and then we'll get to the more romantic definition, right? The hard and cold scientific definition is food is basically the death of another organism so that you can take all of its component micronutrients and nutrients that make it up so that you can use it for yourself, right? So we have to kill a plant, we have to kill an animal, we have to kill a fish, we have to kill bacteria in order to feed ourselves. So that is the fundamental definition of nature. All food is something else dying to nourish you, right? The romantic notion is food is also specifically in the last 10,000 years or so, since we became more advanced societies, agriculture, each culture and society evolved a cuisine that is so uniquely tied to its geography, the things that it grows, its religious and spiritual practices, and a central part of your culture and community identity. And it's what you bring to the table when you bring people together. So food in that sense is also not just nourishes your individual biological body, but it also nourishes your sense of community's identity as well, right? We have expressions like, we break bread together and, chai, we have chai together and so on, right? So food is also that, right? So there is the biological hard definition of it nourishing you, but there is also this larger identity that it creates for you. And it's the only foreign object that we put into ourselves willingly 3 times a day, right? And it's a very tiny number of things that your body's immune system and everything else will accept as food, right? Very few things. We cannot eat anything, right? You can't just pick up some plant or some leaf.
And it might be jungly, they call it, poisonous. And
it mostly will be poisonous. So we have domesticated a few things so that they are food for us.
Yeah. Years back, few things like almond, I would say. It is a bitter, you're not supposed to eat. Gourd, if it is bitter, you're not supposed to.
So a lot of the, like for example, the almond, right, and seeds of apples and so on. So many plants since they're living things, they want to protect their babies, right? So the seed is the baby of the next generation plant. So each plant has a different mechanism to protect it, right? And since plants cannot move, they use poisons, right? And the technique that apple seeds or almonds use is cyanide, right? So they have a enzyme called amygdalin, which, by the way, is poisonous even to the plant itself. So it's kept in a very beautiful way where only if amygdalin combines with one other thing, will it become cyanide.
Okay,
And
so
that is
the
kept separate.
shell is given to the seeds.
So no, when you crush it,
Yeah.
the moment you crush it, that it get mixed and then cyanide is produced, right? So that is what prevents an ant or a bug or something else from eating the seed of the plant, right? So in those small amounts, you're not going to be harmed much. But if you eat a lot of bitter almonds, for example, that you could sort of see the symptoms of mild, cyanide poisoning and so on. That's also historically why, because we were not growing large-scale plantation of almonds, we actually used to collect almonds from the wild. Many of them used to be bitter almonds. So the practice of soaking, right, actually gets rid of a fair amount of that amygdalin, right? Okay. So then if you soak the almond, the wild almond, then it is a little bit more safer to eat. And that's why we have such a strong practice that you have to soak the almond before you eat.
Yeah, it's compulsory, for better bioavailability.
Yeah. But, the fun fact is that we now eat domesticated, farm-raised almonds that do not have any amygdalin. So you do not need to soak.
So sweet almonds are not needed to be soaked.
The almond you buy from the store, you do not need to soak.
Okay.
Has no amygdalin, very little amygdalin. Yeah.
Good to know. Here, I'll continue with a question of our topic. For pulses, we always have that notion that you get, I think, tummy is upset, or you get some stomach ache, or lot of bloating is there. If you eat pulses, people have that notion, when I eat rajma in the evening, I have this problem. So what is science behind it?
See, basically, difference between pulses and grains, right? So you have wheat and rice and millets and all that, right? They are grains. Grains generally contain very easy to digest carbohydrates, okay, and smaller amount of protein. Legumes contain hard to digest carbohydrates. There are some carbohydrates in dal, all dals, tur, moong, anything, right, that contain resistant starch. There are these oligosaccharides that is difficult for your body to digest, okay. And in fact, in case of rajma, the raffinose and stachyose, those resistant starches, you cannot digest at all. They are actually food for your gut bacteria. Okay. So they digest it and they produce carbon dioxide, which is what you experience as bloating, right? So that's not a bad, it's actually a good thing because you're feeding your gut bacteria, right? So you might feel discomfort for sure and you might not feel good, but it's not a bad thing. So first people have to remember that, right? And we are all unique. And our gut bacteria is all different. So the level of discomfort we all feel when we eat, particularly sabut dals, with a lot of the husk, with all of that, the most of that whole dal you will not be able to digest. So then you produce a lot of bloating, which you might feel uncomfortable, right? So that's why we sell dals in many ways. We sell them sabut, we split them, we chilka partially. So that, why do we do that? We are catering to every possible tolerance level. So that is how, yes, dals in general have more resistance.
Then husk and bran is very good source of fiber, insoluble fiber as well.
Yes. So the difference between your resistant starch, which is soluble fiber, okay, that can be eaten by your gut bacteria. Insoluble fiber is not eaten by anything. It is purely for the purpose of having a convenient trip to the restroom the next day morning. That's all. It goes in and goes out, right? So that again is, if you have way too much fiber, then again you could have, some people have discomfort, right? So incidentally, that also happens with millets, because millets have a lot more fiber and some part of the population cannot tolerate that much fiber, right? So fiber actually, fiber is, if you don't take it, it causes constipation. If you take it in the right amount, it's very, very good for you. Above a certain amount, it causes discomfort again. So again, it goes back to this point that when we overthink some of these, this is good, that is bad, this is good, and I want to reduce this to zero, and I want to maximize this, etc., etc. No, I think most things are good only in a narrow range.
Okay, yes, people do have that psychology about, whenever they hear some gyaan milta hai, so they want to implement it completely. And then it boomerangs in a week or so, they are back to the...
But you make an interesting point, and this is an important point for everyone, right? You use the word gyaan. Okay? It's very important for everyone to realize 90 seconds mein gyaan nahi milta hai.
So true.
Gyaan takes years of practice, thousands of pages of books and research studies, and years and decades and many people to produce gyaan. Okay? That's nutritional studies, scientific studies, clinical studies, double-blind, randomized control trial. Yes, and by the way, I will also include thousands of years of practical wisdom of our grandmothers and our mothers in knowing this is good, this is not good, this will work for us, this will not work for us, right? That is also gyaan. Right? Let's not only science is not gyaan. Both are gyaan. One is tacit wisdom, one is experiential wisdom, the other is more testable wisdom and all that, right? We are now become lazy to the point where we somehow believe that a very confident sounding person saying something in 60 seconds is giving you gyaan. He's not, right? And 60 seconds, you can only give some out of context way to scare you, or you can share some small thing but not give the full picture, right? You can say, oh, if you eat this, this is amazing. But gyaan actually means that, let's take an example, that turmeric is fantastic, you please have turmeric milk 3 times a day and all of that.
Smoothies in fashion now.
Add it to smoothies, add it to everything, etc. That is not gyaan. Gyaan is saying that, well, your body actually absorbs very little of the curcumin that is there in turmeric. 95% of the curcumin that is there in turmeric goes out. Okay. You can improve the absorption of curcumin if you eat the turmeric along with pepper.
Yeah.
Because piperine in pepper improves the bioabsorption of curcumin, right? And again, there are many other compounds in turmeric, if you overconsume, are all toxic to your liver. And there are also compounds in turmeric, if consumed in excess, will cause blood thinning. Okay? So, this is gyaan. That is why...
cholesterol people need to...
just to calm down, right? So, that is why, if you go to your grandmother, she's not going to tell you to make a turmeric smoothie. But she will focus instead on sourcing the highest quality turmeric, fresh turmeric, drying it, making it, using it. Because by the way, the curcumin value goes down as you put that thing in your kitchen for months and months, right? And then, in the small amounts that is used in food, along with pepper and other spices, it's fantastic. You do not have to do any of this other nonsense, right? So that the problem is, we've gone from, actually we used to listen to gyaan, but social media is now making us listen to content. That's what I want to tell people. There is gyaan and there is content. You are right now consuming content. And you're thinking it and you're mistaking it for knowledge. It is not.
So this is an eye-opener actually for everybody, because people tend to, blindly follow the things. Currently, now since we are already talking about social media, now there is this buzz about green coffee, apple cider vinegar, chia seeds.
Yeah.
So please highlight.
Same rule, na? See, think about it. If I have only 60 seconds, I can only say chia seeds is amazing, it's a superfood. I cannot give you all the caveats, conditions. I cannot say that it's useful in a small amount. That if you overconsume, you'll probably have indigestion. If you overconsume many of these plant-based sources, you might get kidney stones. So the problem is that I think, as a general rule, no, it is safe to assume there is no such thing as a superfood. It's a wrong framing. There are nutrient-dense foods, okay, and there are calorie-dense foods. Okay, your maida is calorie-dense, not nutrient-dense, because it has no micronutrients. Amla is micronutrient-dense, not calorie-dense. And also remember, you can eat a lot of the calorie-dense stuff. It's very easy. You cannot eat a lot of the nutrient-dense stuff, because many of those micronutrients above a certain amount are not good for you, right? Too much of a vitamin, too much of a mineral, that is also bad for you. So you can eat like 2-3 chapatis, but you cannot eat that much amount of turmeric, right?
Yes.
Or that much amount of spices. So spices are actually micronutrient dense, but you have to use them in small amounts, right? So stop thinking of superfood, villain food, etc., right? Because in your diet, you're going to need some of the calorie-dense stuff. You have to eat wheat, you have to eat chapati, you have to eat maida. You need some basic calories. But as long as you have the nutrient-dense stuff also, and a lot of them, you don't have to break your head, right? But content creator has to make one video every day. So one day it's chia seed, one day it is this, one day maida is villain, one day white sugar is villain. So they are making content, right? None of that is actually relevant to you. Because you think about it, whether your mother or your grandmother, were they breaking their head over chia seeds and hemp seeds? And they were not. They intuitively knew that maida is a special occasion thing. If I'm making a snack, I will use that, right? I'm not eating it every day. I'm not eating it 3 times a day, right? But again, we are now living in an environment where it is so easy and cheap to get all these ultra-processed foods. So, and we are seeing an increase in the rate of diabetes, type 2 diabetes and heart disease and so on. So now people want to find some,
easy, quick
remedy, right? And they want to blame that, right? Instead of changing their eating habits.
Somewhere I read in one of my, knowledge enhancing articles that some medicinal herbs were taken by these content creators, and then they were hyped. They are not supposed to be consumed by humans on regular ground. They were completely medicinal.
Absolutely. This is true of every spice. You are not meant to consume large amounts of any spice. Spices are poisons produced by plants to kill insects, bacteria, fungi. It's their defense mechanism, right? Capsaicin, the thing that burns your feeling of burn is antibacterial, and piperine in pepper that causes that burn in your throat is also antibacterial, right? Allicin in garlic, right? All the other sulfurous molecules in onion. All of these are the plant's way of keeping themselves alive and preventing these things from happening. In small amounts, they're very good for us. In large amounts, they can be completely toxic for us as well, right? That's why in our cooking, you're not adding a tablespoon of any spice. No? So they're meant to be consumed in that kind of small amount and not in these artificial, mix a bunch of herbs and leaves and drink some smoothie is one of the worst things you can do to your liver. Because remember that your liver is the first defense to check for all the nonsense that you're eating and then try to break it down. And then anything that you cannot digest, your liver has to break down, right? And you're stressing it needlessly with all of these things.
Okay, so people starting day with a lot of,
all these kind of random herbs, random this thing, it is absolutely, completely unnecessary, right? You're taking a huge risk because many of these things, they will say it's some traditional formulation and there is no evidence, there is no clinical testing, there is no quality, they did not. So if you take a drug, it has to go through so years and years of testing, right? You can claim anything as some traditional herbal concoction, and then you're directly giving it to human beings, right? Without any impact, right? So you can actually just speak to any liver specialist, and they will tell you that after alcohol-based liver disease, one of the most common reasons for liver damage is people drinking stupid things like this. Herbal remedies, herbal this, herbal that, because so many, see, as I said, most of nature is not edible to us. Our forefathers have domesticated a small number of plants and animals that we can eat safely, right? Stick to that and eat them in the amounts, because we have 10,000 years of experiments and we have survived, our grandfathers have survived, so we know that they are safe. Don't make these really silly random changes on the basis of a 60-second video that you watch on social media.
Same thing. I was like, I heard many people talking about, they want to start with their day with apple cider vinegar diluted in some water, and that will help them to balance the sugar level. Yeah. But then I have seen them having lot of acid reflexes and digestion goes haywire,
No, and also I think the evidence is very weak. It doesn't work for everyone. And you are also, this is a classic case of trying to fix the symptom rather than fixing the underlying problem, right? Now what people believe is that because I had one apple cider vinegar, I will eat extra dessert. I will eat extra sweets. I will eat one extra chapati, right? It doesn't work that way, right? You're still doing the damage to your body. And then on top of that, drinking vinegar is absolutely certain to damage your enamel in your teeth. You'll completely dissolve the enamel in your teeth, right? So don't do those kind of silly things, right? And on top of your acid reflux and all those other issues, it will also damage your teeth. So it is completely a more sustainable way to think about this is to have moderate portions of sweet things.
Okay.
Right, and doing exercise and building muscle, which will reduce your blood sugar far more efficiently over a sustained long-term period and give you long-term benefits than trying to swig apple cider vinegar, right? To all the women, I actually say, go join a gym and do weight training and build muscle. That is the single biggest investment you can make to your long-term health, right? Because we've been conditioned that no, muscle building is for men. It is one of the best things that women can actually do.
Okay, wow. Very good advice, I think. All of you need to join gym or maybe do some weight training at home also. Yeah, it's fine. So here continuing with the topic, diabetes. Resistant starch is something very much new currently. But then there is a glucose meter and all the time I see, after having 2 toast or poha, my sugar went up and then it was down and you eat this, eat that. So, your point of view on those?
See, I think, when last year this kind of trend became hot, particularly actually, in fact, sometime during the pandemic was when it originally, in the West, people started wearing these monitors to see what was happening, right? And initially, I think a lot of the marketing and the science behind it all seemed very legitimate. I think there were people like Glucose Goddess and others saying lots of things about how important this is to prevent sugar spike and so on, right? But I think people again forgot, as I said, there's gyaan and there is content. The other dichotomy is there is marketing and then there is science. Marketing happens very quickly and it can sound very convincing. Science takes time.
A lot of research.
Right? It takes time. And now scientific consensus, at least every serious person who's an expert on metabolism, on diabetes, on all of these things, right, is now saying that if you are not a diabetic person, you learn absolutely nothing from wearing a glucose monitor. The fact that you eat some carbohydrates, that it will produce a sugar spike, is perfectly normal biological behavior for every living thing on the planet. That's how we are built. Okay. The focus is therefore that once you have eaten that, does your sugar level remain high or does it fall down to below the right baseline? That is how a doctor will determine whether you are diabetic or not. Right? It has to come back down to a baseline and not remain elevated for a long period of time, because high levels of glucose in the blood is bad for the body. Right? So that is what the whole thing is. None of this is about saying that you don't eat toast because it spikes your blood sugar. And even worse, influencers give stupid advice like, eating fat along with carbohydrates slows down the sugar spike, so add a lot of butter to your toast. Fine, it's tasty. Who doesn't like toast with Amul butter? But if you are someone with a heart disease risk in your this thing, all of that saturated fat is also not going to be bad for you, right? See, this is again, the problem is you are trying to control a metric which is completely arbitrary and doesn't really tell you anything, and you are doing all kinds of other damage by saying, no, I will eat my rice with extra ghee, right? I will eat my chapati with extra ghee, which is fine, you do that, but don't do it because it's reducing your sugar spike. A sugar spike is perfectly normal for most people who are not diabetic, right? And there is just so much content about this entire thing that is misleading people about a lot of that. You are better off controlling your portions of refined carbohydrates. You eat whole grains. You will automatically see an improvement anyway. Yeah.
So here talking about ghee, fat, butter, my conception as a nutrition person was that applying little butter or little butter on toast or chapati, ghee on chapati made more bioavailability of fat soluble vitamins.
Absolutely. I mean, not just bioavailability. People forget that ghee already contains all the fat soluble vitamins that milk had, right? Milk vitamins get into ghee only, in butter and ghee only, no, not into the protein. No. So therefore, it already has all of that. So therefore, that is why a little bit of ghee with your food is essential, right? A little bit of fat with your food is essential, right? And when it comes to animal fats like ghee or butter, they're going to contain the vitamins that we need, right? Vitamin A, D, E and others, right? A plant, so you cannot get vitamin D from plant.
Plant sources, yeah. Okay. Then continuing with the thing is that I saw some content about recently, lot of celebrities. So we are sticking on to social media stuff more because that is what people are going to see us also on. So we want to break their myths about few things. Celebrities and lot of things, lot of concept about adding ghee to your coffee. So coffee, how you spell coffee, tea as a beverage, and science behind it.
It is, again, one of those typical social media trends. It again, in some sense, comes from, we have an obsession somehow for declaring ghee to be a superfood, right? Because it's a traditional Indian thing and we want it to be a superfood, just like Italians say olive oil is a superfood. The honest truth is that these are all fats, right? And ghee is mostly saturated fat. For sure, it has short chain fatty acids that make it far better than what we were told in the 1980s and 90s when we were said, no, ghee is bad. I mean, that's wrong, right? But we are correcting it in the wrong direction by over consuming ghee.
Yeah.
See, a gram of ghee is 9 calories. Okay, so just remember that it is a fat. It's a highly calorie dense food, and all that saturated fat beyond a point for people who have a predisposition to heart disease, it is a high risk. No qualified doctor will ask you to eat large amounts of ghee. Okay, they will say go easy on all oils, right? And yes, and there is now evidence that the monounsaturated oils are slightly better for heart health than
NCT oils,
yeah,
particularly medium chain fatty acids.
Correct.
Coconut oil falls
coconut
in
oil,
that.
yes. Again, but also remember, coconut oil is 85% saturated. Right? So it is not a. And again, the problem with this entire fat thing, right? People they prioritize patriotism and all that over actual science, right? Coconut oil, ghee, palm oil are all very similar saturated fats, but palm oil is considered villain, and coconut oil and ghee are praised because they are local, right? If you go to Malaysia, Indonesia, they will consider palm oil to be the healthiest. They will consider coconut oil to be unhealthy. So it's, both of us can't be right. The actual answer is that too much of consumption of any fat is actually bad, right? So to your ghee coffee thing, the second point I want to make is, the first point about not getting your nutritional advice from social media, right? Or I understand we all don't have time. I mean, I want to follow someone I trust and listen to their advice, but please verify, right? And the second thing I will say is that celebrities are not good sources of inspiration about health at all. And the reason for that is very simple. No disrespect to them. To become an actor or an athlete, you are already genetically gifted. Because if you're not genetically gifted, there is no way you became a model, you became an actor, you became a sportsman, right? Only the absolutely genetically gifted, on top of their genetic luck, they do hard work and they get to that position. But don't forget the genetic luck, right? So when they tell you things like, oh, I did this diet and I got healthy.
But they do so much exercise also.
Not only that, right? And they have access to personal chefs and so many other things. And they tell you about the one thing without telling you about 100 other things that would have contributed to their this thing, and which includes genetics, right? So that is why do not take advice from celebrities on this, because they are not the right people to do that, because most of why
Common
they are
man
successful has nothing to do with what you eat or what you have access to eating.
Yeah. And after eating that, you cannot be.
And yeah, you cannot, because that person was already born like that, right? So you don't break your head about that, right? And so things like ghee coffee, the amount of calories that you're going to needlessly get. See, I can understand that people who eat a lot of milky coffee, right? So people forget that a cappuccino with a little bit of sugar and all of that can top like 300 calories. Especially if like a mid-sized cappuccino, 300 calories. That's a lot of calories. If you're a woman and your daily calorie target is around 1800 calories, that's 1/5 of all you can eat in a day, right? So there is obviously, I think the realization should be that maybe think about switching to a black coffee or coffee with low skim milk which doesn't taste good, right? Or develop a taste for black coffee instead of going for these hacks like trying to do ghee coffee and all of those things. There is just absolutely no medical evidence that it is good or anything.
Coffee or tea, what is better?
No, again, as I said, so there are cultural preferences, right? So at the end of the day, don't let anyone lecture you about whether something is technically healthy or not, right? I mean, if waking up in the morning and eating chai is your thing, that's what you should do, right? But if you just want to look at the science, the strongest evidence exists for black coffee, not milky coffee, not like cappuccino. Black coffee has some of the highest amount of polyphenols and antioxidants that you can get from food. And in fact, there's a fun little fact that in typical American diets where they eat very little vegetables and fruits, the largest source of antioxidants in the American diet is coffee.
Oh.
So coffee actually is good for you if it does not affect your sleep, right? Some people are very sensitive to caffeine. Coffee has more caffeine than tea. If you ask me, I drink coffee. But if you're a tea drinker, by all means, I think don't break your head, right? I mean, if you have an overall balanced diet. But if you're someone who drinks highly milky coffee, I would urge you to try black coffee. There's much better health benefits.
Okay. So if sleep is a problem, you need to...
Oh yeah. So caffeine takes 4 to 6 hours to be flushed out from the brain, from your blood. So very sensitive people should try and avoid coffee after like 2 p.m. So typically about 6 hours before you sleep. Yeah.
Throw some light on particularly B12 deficiency is currently so much in, and particularly vegetarian diet. I hear a lot about soil and this and that.
So B12 actually is one of those things where historically, I think what experts seem to believe is that when we lived in villages, right? If regardless of whether you are a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian, source of B12 fundamentally is soil bacteria, by the way. That's where it comes from. Okay. Some reason, we still don't know why, we seem to have, that is an essential vitamin and it comes only from soil bacteria. Maybe as a result of how mankind grew up growing plants, agriculture, it's part of that, right? And historically, we would harvest the stuff from the soil. It wouldn't be 100% washed. Some of that soil will be there in the vegetables and root vegetables. And from that, you're going to get that bacteria that will produce the B12, or the B12 will already be there, right? In the soil and so on. So we never had much of a problem as a serious problem, right? Again, to be fair, the other thing to remember is that it was only in the 20th century, we were able to diagnose vitamin deficiencies. Earlier, we didn't have a name for it. Somebody would have a big throat. We didn't know it was a thyroid, right? Where thiamine deficiency or a iodine deficiency iodine deficiency and so on. And when we discovered that it was an iodine deficiency, then the solution to the problem was to add iodine to salt, because then it's an easy fix, right? See, in the 1960s, around 1950s and 60s, people in India forget that so many kids in the Himalayan region, particularly UP and that region where they are far away from the sea, so the soil doesn't have iodine, and they don't have they're also vegetarian, so iodine doesn't come from vegetarian sources. They would have, so many kids have the thyroid problem, and that also impairs cognitive development and all that. No? So the government ran a program to promote iodized salt. They were only eating the senda namak, which has no iodine, all of that, right? So iodized salt, and we fixed that problem, right? So people are completely forget that while historically we dealt with deficiencies not by knowing the science of it, but through practice knowledge of, if I have these things in my region, as my grandmother told me, we have survived so long, so it will work. So that's why we find that dal chawal mixes gets you all the amino acids, right? Having palak gets you all the B vitamins, right? Squeezing lime at the end gets you the vitamin C, right? Drinking milk gets you all the fat soluble vitamins. And so in that sense, you broadly got it. And plus you're living in a village and you're harvesting the stuff from the soil, you got vitamin B12, right? So that's the general hypothesis, that even if you're vegetarian, you probably got it. And you also get a tiny amount from milk, dairy anyway, right? It comes only from animal sources. So only now are we able to do large-scale testing, and now we know 76% of the Indian population is not getting enough protein. A huge percentage of the population is vitamin D deficient. Half the population is vitamin B12 deficient. And again, this has become particularly more of a concern because we are not harvesting muddy vegetables from the soil anymore. We're not drinking water from earthen pots and those kinds of things. We are living in hyper hygienic environments where we don't have access to those soil bacteria or those natural ways which somehow got in, right, without causing too many problems. So now that you know it, there's an opportunity to fix that problem, right? If you're a vegetarian, the only way to really fix that problem first is you get tested, because see, some people are able to absorb enough vitamin B12 from milk and other things, cheese, right? These are all good decent sources, right? But some people are not. So if you are deficient, just take a supplement. Ask a doctor, see if you are deficient, get yourself tested, then take a supplement. You don't need much, right? And it improves the quality of your life. Yeah.
Recently, there is a trend about hydraulic and this kitchen garden stuff where you don't need mud or soil to grow plants, vegetables.
Yeah. Yes.
So then, does those plants and vegetables have the nutrients we need?
They do, because what you'll normally add to the water is that you will add all of the minerals that the plant needs as dissolved in the
water.
Right? So, but what it might miss, I think it kind of goes to that whole point about there's a lot of bacteria and other organisms and worms and other things in the soil, right? And many of them are also trying to attack the plant, right? And the plant, in order to defend itself, is also producing a lot of these other chemicals that incidentally makes it tastier, right? So sometimes what we'll find is that the hydroponic one will have a slightly blander taste because that plant is not facing any attack from anyone, right? So this is also kind of why the difference between you grow plants with pesticides versus organic, right? The plant is not attacked by any pest. It's not going to produce the flavor molecules that it's actually using to defend against the pests, right? So that is why organic done in the right way has tastier produce and it'll be smaller because the plant now has to focus on producing that. So your tomato will become smaller, but it'll be tastier.
So organic stuff is tastier.
Yeah. So it is, the only problem with organic is that agriculture is hard, and if you're a large commercial enterprise, organic is high risk, right? If you're not, right? So the problem is that many organic producers will also use organic pesticides, right? Neem leaves and all those other things. They are pesticides at the end of the day, right? And again, some of those things can also be toxic. So the problem is that if you know a farm and if they are really trustworthy and you know how they are growing, right? And also remember that true organic stuff, it will also be expensive. You have to pay for the risk the person has to take. Because one infection and this thing will be gone, right? So farming is hard, right? So that's what people have to remember.
Okay. And recently there is a lot of, GMO stuff going on. I came across a discussion in one of the agriculture forums, and it was saying that tomatoes we are eating today are not tomatoes at all. They are so genetically modified that you don't even get the taste of it. You don't get the real nutrient that you will get from a tomato. So
first thing that people will be surprised by is that other than cotton, there are no genetically modified crops in India.
Sweet corn?
It's all nonsense.
No?
No. So if the corn was grown in the US and you imported it and it came from a GMO corn, then yeah. But again, even in the US, the GMO corn is not used for feeding humans. They feed the corn to the cows and the animals.
Okay.
So they don't approve it for human use, right? So this is despite the fact that GMO is actually safe to eat. But first and foremost, India has you're not eating any genetically modified.
Then how do we get the similar type of tomatoes? I used to have uneven, like you said, organic, right?
So that is people forget that the technology of agriculture over the last 100 or 150 years has involved taking seeds, right, growing them, and then how did farmers 2000 years ago, how did they domesticate the wild rice and make the rice plant that you have today? It's called artificial selection, right? So you find the one wild rice plant that is not 10 feet tall but is shorter, right? So that you can easy for you to harvest. You find the one rice plant that has 2 or 3 of the stalks of rice grain, so you get more grains. And you only let that reproduce. So that is called selective breeding.
Okay.
Done over hundreds and thousands of years, you now have a variety of rice, a basmati, a sona masuri and all of that, that has some very specific characteristics. So people have a weird, distorted idea of what genetic modification is. This is also genetic modification, except that you're doing it over a longer period of time. By not allowing the other varieties to reproduce, you're only saying these characteristics I will allow to reproduce, and so my apple became sweeter, the tomatoes became larger, the chickens became bigger, the eggs became bigger. Everything that you see today has been as a result of humans carefully and selectively breeding that. Now, that's what we did for most of history. Around the 1900s, we found another technique to do it. And that technique, and I kid you not, is to blast the seed with radiation, because we discovered radioactivity. So we would blast it with radiation because radiation will cause mutation. So what we said, okay, I can have the farmer grow the seed, wait 3 weeks for it to grow. Then I will see, is the potato big or small? I have to wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks for that to happen, right? So the lab fellow said, why do that, no? Why don't I blast it with radiation and grow all of them, and I save the time in then figuring out. So maybe one of the mutation will be lucky enough so that I get a slightly larger potato. Here's the fun fact. This technique is also not called genetic modification.
But does it not distort the DNA or nutrition?
Yes, what genetic modification is a distortion of the DNA, right? So in the 1970s, we discovered a third technique where we said, no, now we can be precise. Why am I going to blast something with radiation or try to keep reproducing over hundreds of years or 20 years to produce a better quality wheat, right? So by the way, all the varieties of rice and wheat that during the 1960s, we managed to get to save ourselves from starvation during the Green Revolution, are none of them were genetically modified. They were all artificial selection only, right? Okay. In the 1970s and 80s is when we then said, now I can take the seed, go to a lab, I can take some DNA from a bacteria, okay, that is very resistant to some pest, this fungus. I will take that gene and insert it into this rice plant, or this wheat plant, or this soy plant, or whatever it is. And now I don't need to use pesticides. This will naturally be resistant to that bug, and I can therefore have a larger yield. Now, the problem is, everyone when they say GMO, they are only referring to that third category. And that third category in India is not approved for any human consumption.
Okay.
Despite it being safe, it's not approved. Where is it approved? Approved for cotton. Because, and again, it's controversial. So BT cotton, right? I mean, BT brinjal is also, one of the other things under consideration. There are other problems with the business model and the exploitation and the fact that the farmers may have to keep buying the seeds. There's a corporate angle to that story, but genetic modification per se is, we've been genetically modifying for tens of thousands of years by artificial selection. Then we did it using blasting radiation. Then we did it in the lab by actually taking DNA and inserting, which all effect is the same effect. Only difference is in the third category, you're taking the DNA from another living thing, and it's not from the same species, right? So, from a definition standpoint, only the third category is considered GMO. And we don't eat any of that. So, all the large tomatoes you see, all the stuff that you see, you believe is GMO, are all products of artificial selection or radiation. Because this recombinant DNA was discovered only in 1970s and 1980s. We have had large tomatoes for the last 100 years. US has had large tomatoes for 100 years, right? Now, only in the last 20, 30 years, because we have liberalized, now we have access to those seeds. That's all. And here the agricultural research, like for example, India has studied and made, how do you think potatoes, which only grow in cold climates in South America and Europe, how do we grow it in Gujarat, in this hot and dry climate, right? How do you think that happened? It happened because you have your Central Potato Research Institute in Shimla for the last 50 years, breeding and crossbreeding till they found a variety that is able to grow at high temperature in the plains. Right? That is how now potatoes now available everywhere, and tomatoes are now available all through the year. Right? In 20 years ago, 30 years ago, most people will remember many vegetables were not available during winter season. Winter vegetables were not available. Now all vegetables are available all through the time. It's just simply artificial selection, nothing to do with GMO.
Wow, that's really enlightening.
And also our population, see, people forget that you have your population at the turn of the century at 1900 was 1 billion. We are 8 billion, right? You can't feed everyone using organic small size tomato. You need the large standard size tomato that will not spoil. That's what you need.
That's truly enlightening. I'm going to have lot of takeaways today. So going back to the basics, water. Recently, RO water has a lot of controversy against the, of course, hygienic. Water should be hygienic. Water should be healthy. I do go back to the times when I used to, as a kid, I used to travel with my dad. And he used to say that to have good immunity, you need to drink the highway water. Of course, it should be clean, but it gives you strong immunity, and lot of gut microbiomes is something new, latest word. I think that time we did not know that, but I used to remember those things. So what you have to say on the water of RO and this?
See, first I think, so I remember when I was young and the mineral water was not a thing and you just drink the local water. I also know that for instance, I was absolutely fine, but I know cousins of mine that every travel, they used to have dysentery. Okay. Sometimes it would be pretty serious also. So we have to remember that 20 or 30 years ago, if you look at the data, the number of Indians that were dying from waterborne diseases is very high. Waterborne infectious diseases is very high, right? So yeah, I mean, and again, immunity and all of that, there's a function of genetics to that also, right? And there's a function of your diet and many other things. It's too complicated. But rest assured, do you want to take the risk of running into a infected water that can actively harm you? Not just have some harmless bacteria that will improve your gut diversity, but actually poison you, right? Which is what dysentery and all these other diseases, other parasites, right? I mean, non-bacterial parasites are also there in water and so on. Versus drink water that is reverse osmosis purified, will not have any germs, but will also not have any minerals. So this is sort of like that balance, right? And I believe that when you're traveling, I don't think you should be taking that risk. It's a question. So there are some people who are like, yeah, you know what, I have a very strong this thing, I will just go eat. Some people are able to do that, are able to go to a place, eat street food, not have any problems, have pani puri, not have any problems, and so on. And some people are not, right? So I think it is about each individual has to evaluate what their risk appetite is. Okay. If you're going about taking all of these blind risks, know that you have a statistically significant chance of getting a waterborne disease. Is that something that you want to take a risk? Okay. On the other hand, if you're in a city and you're drinking only RO water, you need to make sure that you're getting all the minerals you need from food, right? And again, if that is too much to think that, oh, am I getting enough calcium, enough this, enough all of that, copper, magnesium and all of that from food, if you don't want to overthink that, then the other choice you can make is test the TDS of your water in your area, groundwater. Depending on whether you're getting groundwater or whether you're getting cities water, right? In many cases, cities water tends to be treated already, right? So you might not need to do RO on top of that, right? Regular filtering might be enough. But in general, if the TDS, total dissolved solids, is very high, there's too many, the heart is very hard, then you have to do RO. There's no other choice. But if the TDS is pretty low, then you don't need to do RO because you'll end up you'll be drinking bland, tasteless water. And on top of that, you're not getting minerals. So I think it's a call that you make. There's no easy answers.
You need to get your water tested.
And based on the TDS, you decide whether RO is the right option or a UV and some of those other filters are the right option. Make sure you are getting all your minerals from food. Do not rely on water to get all your minerals. It's just a convenient way, but it's not the only way, right? Your diet, if your diet is diverse, you will get all the minerals you need. And when you travel, I think if you are somebody who's been living in the city, right? Say, your father would have spent so much of his life in a rural setting and we do know that people who live in the villages already have more gut bacteria, greater diversity, and a greater ability to tolerate new parasites and new all of that. Us people living in the city in these highly hygienic, air-conditioned environments, drinking mineral water all the time, if you think you can go to a village and drink water from the local well, you are probably taking a risk, right? So it might not be worth it. So is what I would say. Yeah.
So talking about the food habits these days, particularly in urban area, we have lot of these food apps coming in.
Yeah.
Everything is at very easy access. So what is scary about the food habits that are changing?
So I think it is evident that as agriculture and food production becomes more and more efficient, so we are able to produce more and more calories easily, which means that the amount of money we pay for every calorie is going down, which means that you have access to a large number of calories with very little micronutrients at, you just move your hand and the chips and there's all of these things, instant noodles, ready to eat foods. So one is that you have access to a tremendous amount of calories too easily. And our bodies are actually evolved for scarcity, not abundance. See, for most of history, we never got food easily. Before agriculture, you would have to do hunter gathering. You won't find something every day. So fasting was a standard pattern of how we used to live. You feast and fast. When there is food, you feast. Then after that, you fast for days, right? That's how our bodies are evolved. Eating 3 times a day is tremendously damaging, but that's the life we have adapted to, right? So which is why it's important to pay attention to what all you are eating and how many calories you are getting and so on. The problem is further complicated by we are also over technologizing our attitude towards food. One we already discussed how I think, you're trying to get all of your wisdom instead of doing the hard thing of reading a book or reading multiple sources or listening to your grandmother. You are listening to some influencer say something for 30 seconds. You're taking a shortcut there, right? It's a mental shortcut, and you're also taking the same mental shortcut when it comes to food, because you're thinking that rather than do the harder job of eating less food, you can eat whatever you want as long as no maida, no sugar, no this, and you will use an app to track, you will use an app to measure calories. Those are lazy solutions, right? Because you can have a maida thing with a lot of vegetables and a lot of protein and it's fine, right? If you eat it in small portions, you're fine, right? You can eat a very healthy, home-cooked, traditional meal and still a thali can be 2000 calories and that's too much. Right? It can be as traditional as it gets, but it could be too much. It could have too much fat, too much carbohydrates, right? So I think the problem with many of these apps, again, is that they are prioritizing, you think they're prioritizing convenience, but they're actually encouraging intellectual laziness.
Yes, I totally agree to this.
Right? Because they're somewhat telling you don't have to think.
Like storing the mobiles, right? We don't remember numbers now.
So that is why I think when it comes to food, mindfulness essentially means getting off those apps and looking at what you're cooking, understanding how your grandmother, your great-grandmother ate, understanding how many calories you're actually eating, understanding if you're getting enough protein, enough micronutrients, enough fiber, and then minimize fat and refined carbohydrates as much as you can, right? While still being happy about it. See, there is no diet is sustainable if food does not make you happy, right? Like who wants to eat a salad like 3 times a day? There is no joy in life, right? So somehow, and that takes thoughtfulness. If you think an app can give you a shortcut to that, I think you're doing it the wrong way. You have to be mindful about food. At the end of the day, it's what you put into your body, right? It's what nourishes your body. And I hate to tell you this, it is also what will damage your body. What else is going to damage your body? Of course, stress, lifestyle, and all that. But the biggest cause of damage to your body is food. But you also need food. You can't live without it, right? Being more mindful of that and not outsourcing it to some algorithm or an app or a social media influencer is very critical.
I saw one very nice video about the app telling you that what you want to eat, and then it's suggesting you what topping you will have and what sauce you will have.
Yes.
Because they know everything.
Yeah.
What is your likes and dislikes?
Sure. I'm not, see, apps can be useful. Especially, for example, if you are genuinely calorie tracking. You obviously cannot remember, and you also cannot, so you can easily put, say, 2 gulab jamuns and it will give you like a number. Right? The only thing to keep in mind sometimes is that many of these calorie tracking apps are highly inaccurate for Indian food. Indian food is very hard to calculate calories for.
Everywhere it is different. Every 100 kilometer our diet changes.
No, our dishes involve too many ingredients, right? Yes. See, what goes into making a pasta, like some 3 things. We know exactly how much butter, milk, maida, you know that, and tomato or whatever protein you add, cheese, and you know that exactly, no? How will you calculate that for a thali? It's very complicated, right? There's so much, and there's so much hidden fat everywhere. We do tadka on everything. Now, how many people recognize that if you have some cabbage sabji, most of the calories from that are coming from the oil?
Oil, yes.
Right? And it is therefore, I think it is so many of these apps can be misleading also. So my point is that, see, use the app to the extent that it helps you be disciplined about it. But don't outsource your thinking to the app.
Wow, so well said. Don't give your brain to the app. Use it yourself.
When it comes to food, at least.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a lot of craving about food, when particularly these palatable foods that we get from outside.
Oh, yes.
It's always you crave for, like I'll say my son, if he wants to eat vada pav, he would want to eat it, it's like, so what works there,
No, I think I would say it's a very, very complex set of things at play here, right? One is the abundance also means that 50 years ago, if you were not in a kind of like a Mumbai or a city where you could just walk out and have a vada pav, right? Having a craving for a vada pav really didn't help you because there's no way to satisfy it. Now you can satisfy it because you can open an app and order it and it will be at your doorstep in 20 minutes, right? That didn't exist back then. So there are dynamics at play. The availability of these things, hyper availability, also makes it easy for you to give in to those temptations more easily, right? And we are also, as I said, we are built for scarcity, which means that when abundant food is there, it's very hard for us to say no, right? It's very hard to resist one jalebi, very hard to resist one samosa, right? You're just there, you have to control it, but you're having chai and there is a plate of samosas, you're going to pick one up, right? You won't even know you picked it up, you'll pick it up, right? So there is that. The second aspect to this is also that there's more deeper research that is also emerging, that what we consider cravings are also coming from the fact that in general your overall what you eat may be imbalanced. That's why you're getting these cravings, right? For example, if you're eating high satiety foods, which is basically fiber and protein, the hormones in your body that then signal satiety work more efficiently and they make you feel full for longer, right? And again, this is particularly and probably relevant in a state like Gujarat where your per capita consumption of protein may not be enough. A lot of carbohydrates you eat.
Yeah, and vegetarian
and then so your
diet,
satiety, you're very rarely feeling satiated. So that's why this state has a amazing snacking habit.
Yes.
So for me, it's always a surprise that I am never far away from food in Gujarat. Food is always there. I always worry that I'm just going to go grab something. There is no place, no office, no setting, no home, no this thing where at least 50 varieties of snacks and something is already always there. I mean, I don't experience that if I'm in Chennai and all that. That in general, if I'm in between meals, very few things will be available. Right? So the environment also kind of affects that. And again, as I said, you're also going to constantly want to keep snacking if you're not getting enough protein and fiber, right? Okay. So you're probably okay on protein because you eat a lot of fiber, but protein for sure in Indian vegetarian diets, people have to work a little bit harder, right? So, and again, because again, what happens is that it's not really practical to eat paneer 3 times a day.
Yes.
Right? Because paneer is also 70% calories of fat, right? Not protein, right? So which therefore means that vegetarians have to be creative. They have to develop a taste for soya nuggets and other high density vegetarian sources of protein, right? Those people don't like the taste of those soy nuggets because it's like chewy,
Yeah,
right?
it's more like
so that's
non-veg
but that's the point,
texture.
right? Now, protein is high satiety food. It will make you feel full. That is how it is, right? And carbohydrates are not high satiety foods unless they are like your resistant starch, the thing that you get from a chana dal or a besan those are actually relatively better.
Resistance, I think, of rice kept in the
Rice
fridge.
kept in the rice kept in the fridge overnight also becomes actually, by the way, all starch, right? Even
potato
chapati actually cooked chapati also becomes resistant starch. But the only problem is that rice is still edible, right? Your chapati becomes like too dry,
too dry
and you don't like the taste.
Then we are talking about the protein. There are a lot of whey protein powders available, and people fall for it.
Yes.
But what do you say about the natural resources like sattu powder?
Yeah.
One of the good protein sources.
Yeah, so I hate to break it to you. Sattu powder is not a good source of protein. Sattu powder is a source of carbohydrates, right? So sattu is made from chana dal.
Chana.
Right. See, 100 grams of any of these legumes in dry form give you about 25 grams of protein. Most of the rest is carbohydrates, right? In contrast, soya chunks, which is defatted, right, and etc., right? The carbohydrates also, on a dry weight basis, 50% of soya nuggets is protein.
Oh.
Okay. And therefore, the dal again, and that is the dry dal, but we don't eat dry dal.
We cook it
So again, let me
double.
ask
You
the question.
cannot
So
eat
people,
100 grams
so
of dry dal.
we have this sort of cup in front of us, right? If you have a side dish of this kind and you fill it with dal, how many grams of protein do you think they're there?
I think 6 to 7 grams.
3 to 4 grams.
Oh.
Because again, your dal here is not the thick types; it's much more watery.
Yeah, watery. Yeah.
And dal absorbs water, and there's not much, right? So in general, unless you specifically find a rich protein source, your typical meal is never going to hit more than 15, 16 grams of protein.
Sprouts in the breakfast, nuts.
So sprouts, again, as I said, yes, sprouts are not bad. Again, because it's going to be relatively less water in that, so therefore a little bit more protein. But again, not complete protein and nowhere at the quality level of what you get from milk and cheese. And so on. In fact, I regularly, it is also unfortunate that there's just too much scaremongering about whey protein, right? I just want people to remember that as the state that was literally responsible for ensuring milk is available all the time, every day, right? Your great-grandmother never had access to milk every day, but thanks to Amul and Operation Flood and Verghese Kurian in Anand, every state now has a dairy that ensures that we have 1/3 of the world's cattle population, and we're able to produce so much milk that's used to go waste, and now we're able to actually turn that into all these products like buttermilk and cheese and all these other things, right? So again, it's a very perishable good, and butter and ghee, right? Now, Indians believe that if I take the milk, I churn it, I take the butter, then I melt the butter, clarify it, remove all the non-fat solids, I'm left with clarified butter, that is ghee. And Indians believe it's a superfood. Okay, it's ultra processing. People forget that it's also ultra processing, right? If I take the same process, except instead of removing the protein, I am removing the fat. Okay, whatever you churned the butter, what do you think happens to the rest of that? That milk is what is then processed down to whey powder, because that's the whey protein, right? So when you make paneer, right, the acid curdles the casein and you get paneer. The whey doesn't form those globular structures, it just stays in that liquid. And that is what is then the lactose is separated, and then they make the whey into a powder, right? Like milk powder, etc., etc. So it is actually quite interesting how we believe milk fat turned into ghee is a superfood, but milk protein turned into whey is bad for us. It is ridiculous. It's the exact opposite. The most precious resource you can get from milk is the protein from milk. And therefore, for a country that is not getting enough protein and has 1/3 of the world's cattle, whey protein is the best quality protein you can ever eat. Without all of the fat of paneer and all the rest of that, it is the best thing you can eat, right? So I think, yes, of course, we have to find the right brands. We have to get the right industrial maturity to make sure that the quality is high. It's not has a lot of other sugar and other additives and all of that, but it will improve, right? As India is getting wealthier, find a good whey brand, and there's nothing like it. It's the easiest way to add protein to your diet.
Here, if home remedy comes in, we make paneer and the water left over.
Yes.
I think Bengalis have this tradition of, either drinking it or adding it to your fermenting or...
So see again, always remember, no? So milk is 88% water. Okay? So water doesn't have nutrients. Okay? So you always have to, that's why, when you cook the dal, it absorbs water. So when things absorb water, their number of nutrients are diluted because it's adding water, right? So there is not too many grams. So you can have to drink a lot of that liquid to get a meaningful amount. But a scoop of whey protein is 25 grams of protein. There is no way you can get that from any other source. You have to find some way to eat that one scoop. Again, probably as the state that produces most of India's whey protein, Gujarati should absolutely embrace whey protein. It is your national contribution, and yet you don't consume enough of it, right? It is now protein powder made here is what is being sold every part of India.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yes, and for all the women who are taking up weight training, you have to increase protein intake, because muscle grows only if you consume protein. Your muscle is protein.
Now coming to this particularly when we were talking about AI and
Yes.
food app access and everything, right? So currently there is lot of buzz about AI coming in and changing so many things across, not only the job opportunities, but I am sure it's going to somewhere down affect our food habits, food manufacturing, process houses and everything. So what do you think AI is going to have impact there?
So I think this generation of AI, I think, the simple way I say it is that if your job involves the use of your hands, AI has no role to play right now. Okay. So your job involves the use of your brain, then yes, AI has a role to play in that it can make you smarter, it can make you quicker, it can give you access to knowledge, it can help you, assist you and so on. But cooking at the end of the day is still cutting vegetables and moving your hands and then cleaning, right? So no AI is going to come anywhere close to that till we get like robots. That's still at least 10 years away, right? As an assistant, right, who will clean our kitchen for us. So, but I think, therefore, where on the short run though, I think where AI can be helpful, particularly if you use tools like say ChatGPT and others, you can get some creative ideas about, it can give you pretty good advice on, look, I have this dish, right, but I want to make it high protein, help me make it high protein, right? It can give you some useful suggestions. While remembering that many of these apps often have a Western bias. I mean, they sometimes don't have a good understanding of Indian cooking, but that's also changing. It's improving. There's so much content about Indian cooking on the internet that these models now have a pretty good idea, right? So you can actually use it to get creative cooking suggestions and so on. On the longer run, there are opportunities for nutritionists and doctors, qualified people, to use AI to design a customized diet plan for your genetics. See, today, right now, it's very broad, right? They're looking at you, you're diabetic, you're this weight, you're a woman, you have this high blood pressure, so I'm going to give you this diet. Low salt, low sugar, low whatever, right? I mean, it's very broad based. It is not taking into account genetics. It is not taking into account your cultural, personal preferences. Now, you can now use AI to say, look, here's what I like eating. I am not going to change this. Don't make me eat something I don't like. This is what I like. Now design something that is suitable for my tastes and preferences while also meeting my health goals. That is where I think AI will start to play a role, but not more in a direct end consumer sense. In the near term, it will be more like be usable by dietitians and people who qualified to enough to understand.
Ultimately, people will have to make it themselves.
Right.
AI can tell you what to do.
Tell you, right? And yeah. So don't worry about it. I mean, if your job involves the use of your hands, you're safe, right? So a plumber is more safe than a person, doing software. Yes.
Wow. This is again interesting. Some jobs are going to be irreplaceable.
Yes. That's said, no? So plumbers, kindergarten teachers and nurses will always be precious to society. Investment bankers, college lecturers, and software professionals will not be, right? And yet it is funny that the investment banker, college professor and the software professional are paid 10 to 100 times more than a plumber, kindergarten teacher and a nurse. And yet their jobs are irreplaceable, and we all discovered how important they were during the pandemic, and their jobs are hard and they are underpaid. AI will help you, make you realize that we are underpaying our school teachers and overpaying our college professors.
So true.